What the hell has been happening in Syria? There has been the sudden fall from grace of Bashar al-Assad, who has been ruling this country for he and his family for almost half a century. His fall has been so sudden, so astonishing and so precipitate that the world is left wondering what the hell is going on. But the simple fact is that the signs of this were clear in September this year itself. Let me quickly recapitulate the sad history of this war-torn country. Well, the problems all began for Bashar al-Assad in about 2006 to 2010. There was a severe drought in Syria. Now, because of this drought, the economic conditions suddenly went down. The groundwater that was there for the agriculture, that just dried up, and there were severe economic problems, and quite obviously these then lead to political unrest. In 2011, the United States started its series of Arab revolutions. The Arab Spring, as it was called. It started with Tunisia, then it went on to Egypt, and then it went on to try to create a massive civil war in Syria. In the name of freedom, these Arab Springs were launched. Now they have all melted away without a trace. They are back to authoritarian governments, and most of these instigators of the Arab Spring are either in Europe or in America, the Arab citizens who had led these so-called democratic revolutions. But the simple fact is that in Syria, it erupted into a savage civil war. Initially, there was the Syrian Free Army, which had raised the banner of revolt against Assad, and then it had fled into, formed a government in exile in Turkey, and from there it was trying to shape events in Syria proper. But then it was not very effective, and soon it was taken over. The resistance fighting was taken over by al-Nusra group, Jabal al-Nusra, which was mostly composed of the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda, right? And then in the fierce civil war that followed, the ISIS and Al-Qaeda gained center stage. They became the main opposition. The ISIS charged into Raqqa and established a caliphate of sorts. They had parts of Iraq, parts of Syria, and they had established their caliphate. They had huge oil revenues, and we all know what happened and how they spread radicalization across the globe, and turned out to be one of the most vicious jihadi movements in recent history, right? But the simple fact of the matter is that then a lot of foreign powers started interfering into this. Turkey was already interfering, while the Jabal al-Nusra, the Kurds were aided by the Americans to fight against the Assad regime in Syria. There were people in the south fighting, they were backed by Saudi Arabia and some of the Gulf countries. The entire rationale for this had become that much more urgent because Europe had been cut off from its oil and gas from Russia, and therefore they wanted to have new supply routes, and for this Syria was needed, so Syria would have to fall. As simple as that. Some American companies decide the fate of nations. But the fighting became very fierce. Ultimately, in 2018, the ISIS was destroyed. In 2019, Baghdadi was killed. And then, of course, and all this happened because 2015, 2016, the Russians and the Iranians intervened in a big way to try and stabilize the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad. They said, we will not let it fall. And the Russians provided massive air support. They carpet bombed the rebels. And they had especially gone in to destroy the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda as a threat that before it could spread to them, they would go and fight it in Syria and Iraq itself, they said, and therefore they had intervened 2015, 2016. The Russians, the Iranians had come in a very, very major way. The Iranians and the Hezbollah, they provided the ground troops to help Assad, while Russia provided the air power and the firepower via its Taurs. It made Syria into a combat laboratory and tested out an entire range of new weapons, lethal weapons. And with the help of this, Bashar al-Assad was able to regain control slowly but steadily and surely. He just besieged the cities of Idlib, he besieged the cities of Aleppo, Homs, etc. And he cut off water and electricity, and he carpet bombed them. The Russian Air Force carpet bombed them, and then he recaptured all the cities in the north, including the second most populated city of Aleppo, as also Homs, as also Ham. All these main cities were liberated from the rebels, from the the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda camp, and the only pocket of resistance left was Idlib. In 2020, the Russians and the Turks, they signed a peace agreement. That was the Astana dialogue. The Iranians were part of it, and they signed a peace agreement to have a kind of a ceasefire in situ. Now, ceasefires in situ can be very, very dangerous. An entire pocket of these rebels, almost 1 lakh strong, 100,000 strong, was left in the province of Idlib, to fight another day. And that is precisely what they did. They regrouped, they rearmed. Turkey started re-weaponizing them. Turkey brought in, rebels. Turkey brought in jihadists from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmen, Uyghur rebels, and also fighters from Afghanistan and Pakistan, if you please. A whole potpourri of rebels was brought into the Idlib province to be trained by the Ukrainians in the use of drones, and then they were provided medium artillery, they were provided tanks by the Turks, and this Al-Hams, Tehreek al-Jabal al-Hams was had been created by the Turks to revive the civil war as and when it suited them. So they waited, they sort of trained, rearmed, brought in foreign instructors, etc., etc., and they were very well trained by the Turks, right? And then, unfortunately for Syria, the war started in Ukraine. Russia was heavily bogged down in the fighting in Ukraine. The Hezbollah, from 2023 onward, was heavily bogged down in the fighting against Israel. In fact, it was badly, severely mauled by Israel and absolutely shaken up. It was in no place to really fight any further wars in support of the Syria regime. So the Russian support was diverted. They quite obviously couldn't leave much effort in terms of air power or ground power into Syria while they were fighting the main war in Ukraine. The only Wagner group was initially operating there. Even this, after that rebellion, was mostly taken out and diverted towards Africa, etc. But the simple fact of the matter is that Syria was suddenly without support. The Syrians, unfortunately for them, the Syrian army had become highly complacent. The American sanctions were again taking a big economic toll, and the Syrian army had gone to seed. The Syrian army had gone to seed because some of the soldiers were paying their officers to stay at home and not man the outposts, etc. And the Syrian army was once very proud army. It's supposed to have been a very professional army. It had fought in 67, it had fought even earlier, 1948, 67, it had fought the Arab-Israeli war. 1973, it had done very well in the Arab-Israeli war and almost captured the whole of Golan Heights. Jolani, incidentally, his father comes from there. Jolani is the head of the Tehreek al-Shams. He had come from that same Jolan Heights. Now, like I said, it is an army, it was an army with a very strong reputation. But like I said, they had gone to seed, they have become very lax in their discipline, they had become very complacent, they had taken their eyes off the rebel concentration in Idlib. The 25th Tiger Force Division, one of the best divisions of the Syrian Army, which had been holding the fort in Aleppo, that was withdrawn and brought to the south to face some ragtag insurgent group there. The entire 5 Corps was withdrawn from the area of Aleppo and opposite Idlib and brought down again to Damascus and to the south, and they uncovered the entire area. And at a crucial time when a lot was happening in Idlib, right? 18th of November, there is supposed to have been a meeting between the Shin Bet, the commander of the Israeli intelligence, the Shin Bet, and the Turkish intelligence chief. They had had a meeting. 25th of November, the NATO Secretary General, he had come and had a meeting in Turkey, and they had worked out this plan. As we all know, Israel had mounted a major offensive which had virtually destroyed the Hezbollah, right? The main supply routes, 3 supply routes of the Hezbollah, which came from Iran into Iraq and into Syria, from them they were supplying them the heavy weaponry and the rockets with which they kept up a barrage, and they gave a tough fight to the Israelis in southern Lebanon, and from there they were almost daily bombarding the Israeli mainland cities, even Tel Aviv and Haifa port. So Israel then gave a threat to Syria that you will suffer terrible consequences if you allow these routes to be used by Iran via Syria. And that was the time, Syria's fate was more or less sealed, because the Israelis and the Turks decided to come together with American backing to finally overthrow the Syrian regime. What was the matrix of motivations? Why did they decide to choose this time to go for the jugular of Bashar al-Assad? Number one fact was that they wanted to distract Russia from its victory role in Ukraine. The Russian forces were pressing forward slowly but relentlessly in the Donbass province in the east, down south in Zaporizhzhia, up north in Kharkiv, and also in the Kursk salient. About 45% of that area they have taken back. So they were on a victory roll, on a victory march in Ukraine, and the Americans were keen to divert them, create digressions for them in Syria. Once again, the Russians have refused to pick the bait. They continued to provide air support, but the simple fact is you can provide air support providing the army on the ground has some heart in the fighting. The Syrian army seemed to have lost all heart in the fight. So the HTS had made thorough preparation. It had been re-weaponized by the Turks, and they had brought in, like I told you, a medley of jihadists from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, also from Turkmenistan, and also from the Uyghur rebels had been brought in, Afghans and the Pakistanis had been brought in. Ukrainian instructors had trained them in the use of FPV drones. And like I said, they had artillery and they had the armor to back them. So it is with this that the HTS then struck a major surprise offensive it launched against Aleppo. And in 3-4 days, the entire Syrian opposition, there was hardly any opposition to start with. Most of the Syrian 25th Tiger division had been withdrawn already. The 5th Corps had been withdrawn already. The defenses were very thin. And there is a school of thought that the Syrian army had been bribed, and it just melted away. Aleppo fell, then in quick succession Homs fell, and then Hom fell, and then they were heading straight for Damascus, and now they are in Damascus. Within a matter of just about a week, the whole of the entire facade has crumbled. The entire facade has crumbled. Bashar al-Assad had gone to Syria to interact with Putin. He had left his family there. He'd been told to go back and lead the flight, show some spine. Well, but you can show spine providing your army is willing to fight. In this case, the army has been bribed by the CIA, by the Turkish and the Israeli intelligence. Look, we were all wondering, if you just do a military analysis, the rebels, compared to their force ratios with the Syrian army, there was no reason for such a quick collapse, such a precipitate disaster that had seems to have overtaken the Syrian army. They could have easily fought and fought back very hard. But this is precisely what had happened in Iraq in 2003. We were all anticipating that the Republican Guard divisions, 5 divisions of the Republican Guard, have a terrific military reputation, had a terrific military reputation, and they were supposed to really fight in the inner ring. The outer ring was manned by the ragtag Iraqi army that didn't hold up much to the Americans. The inner ring was supposed to hold. But to everybody's astonishment, it just collapsed in a matter of days without any fight, without a semblance of a fight. Later it emerged that the CIA had simply bribed all the generals of the Republican Guard, and they had taken their troops away and they had marched out. They had betrayed their country. I mean, shameful indeed, on the promise that they would be given positions of power in the new dispensation. They were ruthlessly de-Baathified. They were all thrown out. And these are the people, these disgruntled people, these people who had been taken for a ride by the CIA, who later became the ISIS. And we all know the kind of damage that they did. Exactly the same has happened to all those military analysts who are wondering what happened to the Syrian army. They were bribed. They were bribed. And they did not even put up the semblance of a fight. Now the rebel forces, so-called, are inside Damascus. They have taken over the presidential palace. Bashar al-Assad is supposed to have flown away in an aircraft that vanished from the radar screen, whether it has crashed or whether it reached the Russian base at Tortaus/Latakia. We do not know as yet. Nothing is clear. He could equally have tried to flee to some of the Arab states. Egypt was prepared to give him shelter, so was Qatar, etc. All these Arab states had suddenly, they have welcomed him back to the Arab League. So they were prepared to give him shelter, but we do not know where exactly he is. So once again, it is essential to recapitulate what were the motivations for this sudden trying to dethrone the Assad regime. Like I said, one, very simple, was to distract Russia from its ongoing battle in Ukraine. It has refused to be so distracted. It realized, it tried to give as much air support as possible, and when it realized that this wasn't working, it has simply gone and it has simply washed its hands off Bashar al-Assad, apparently. So has Iran, because that also could not commit much troops to the ground, because then they knew that they would invite a hell of a lot of Israeli and American air power application, which would do them a lot of damage, which could trigger a wider conflict, which they are seemingly quite eager to avoid. The Hezbollah has its hands full. It has been trying to survive in Lebanon. It would like to focus on Lebanon and not get distracted here. The Qataris are happy that they will get a route for a pipeline via Syria into Turkey and to Europe, so that they can make money and Europe can be compensated for the oil and gas it has lost from Russia. The Israelis are happy that they have now been able to cut the Iranian supply route to Lebanon, which was coming via Syria. But have they gotten into a bigger problem with the new Sunni group, which is old Al-Qaeda and ISIS, now in power in Syria? After all, in Gaza, they are Sunnis, the Palestinians are Sunnis. And what could this mean for them? Israel is now thinking of, trying to capture the Gaza Heights again, quickly get hold of the Gaza Heights and possibly send some Palestinians, throw them into this place. Let's not forget that in almost the 2 decades worth of the civil war, Syria, about 14 million people have been displaced. 5 million had gone to Turkey, out of them about 2 million had gone to Europe, and about 9 million were displaced internally. About 600,000 Syrians have been killed, which includes about 400,000 civilians. I don't know of any country which has suffered as much in recent times. One hopes that at last the poor people of Syria will have some relief and succor and peace will last. But it looks very, very difficult. It's a potpourri of competing groups. There are the Kurds, there are the Sunni groups, the Salafi groups, there are the groups in the south, there are the Shia groups coming from Iran, there was the Hezbollah which is operating there. This volatile mixture is likely to keep the pot boiling in Syria. I don't see peace coming back very soon to that benighted land. The Americans have pulled off their coup, the Syrians have pulled off their coup. The country that has its name in the mud is Turkey. Turkey claimed to be a great patron of the Palestinians. It said that it would fight the Israelis, but it has now cooperated with the Israelis and the Americans in trying to destroy the Syrian last bastion that was standing of Bashar al-Assad. It has tried to cut the routes from Iran to Lebanon, which was helping the Hezbollah. It has done its damnedest possible to harm the Palestinian cause, and yet it wants to be the head of the Islamic Caliphate. Turkey is dreaming of being the head. After this kind of about-face, shameless treachery that it has displayed towards the Palestinian cause, I'm not sure what their standing will be in the Arab world. Yes, they may have made physical gains, but they have lost reputationally. They have taken a big hit. Thank you.